Hi, my name is Sebastian Stubbe, and I'm the CEO of Pine State Regional Center. On behalf of our whole team, I welcome your interest in our Regional Center and EB5 project. As a longtime U.S. permanent resident, I know firsthand the value of the green card, and I share a very similar background with many of our EB5 investors. Like so many aspiring immigrants, I first arrived in the United States to study on an F1 visa. My student visa served me well, and I seized upon my school experience, but not until later, when I finally secured my green card, did I realize how much the United States had to offer someone like me. A world of unrestricted professional opportunities opened up for me, and my family benefited from the many advantages of American life. As the world sadly becomes more insular and many developed nations are raising more and more barriers to immigration, I'm a firm believer in investing in what I call mobility insurance. The ability to insure your family the right to travel, to seek out the best education, to pursue business opportunities wherever they arise, and to access the most advanced health care. The U.S. Green Card is a superb tool for all these priorities, and today the EB5 program is probably the best remaining access point for qualifying investors. Being the CEO of an EB5 regional center, you might expect me to say this, but I genuinely and objectively feel that pursuing a green card for our family was the single most valuable decision we made. And I believe EB5 remains one of the best ways to access the American dream, as long as you put safety and quality first. Pine State Regional Center and the Big River Steel project offer EB5 investors a series of unique benefits. Our regional center has a long and steady track record of protecting investors and creating jobs, and thanks to the use of so-called bridge equity, the Big River Steel project provides EB5 investors with the opportunity to invest in a project which is already completed, has already created all the necessary jobs, and is already extremely profitable. When evaluating EB5 projects, we believe an investor's first concern should be safety. And I would boil it down to really four primary areas of risk on which to focus. First, is the regional center a good partner for you and with your best interests in mind? Secondly, does the EB5 project provide you with a solid path to getting a green card? Thirdly, are you confident that the project will create sufficient jobs so that the conditions on your green card can be removed? And fourth, is the project likely to have sufficient capital to repay you your investment at the end of the process? Pine State and the Big River Steel project can give an EB5 investor confidence in all four of these areas. As you will see, while your capital will remain at risk as is required by the EB5 law, this project has no financing risk, no completion risk, and no jobs risk. And furthermore, as the project is already complete, investors can gain a lot of comfort about the likelihood of capital repayment at the end. So let's go through each of these four areas one by one. The first question for an EB5 investor is, who is going to be your partner to guide you through the process and help you protect your capital? While you don't need to invest via a regional center, over 95% of EB5 investors choose to use a regional center. There are a number of advantages, so if you can find one that you trust and feel good about, it does make a lot of sense. Pine State Regional Center is part of Arkansas Capital Corporation, a 60-year-old so-called economic development corporation. ACC was founded by Winthrop Rockefeller and top business leaders in the 1950s with the single mission of creating economic activity and good jobs, and that mission remains true today. Our company is a well-known nonprofit organization with a very heavy emphasis on risk control, and our management team has a very long track record of safe and successful economic development. ACC invests billions of dollars through a variety of job-creating programs, including new market tax credits, small business lending, venture capital, business plan competitions, and also EB5. Our firm has a close working relationship with the government, and it was originally the governor of Arkansas who came to ACC and asked us to establish a regional center for the state of Arkansas and the surrounding southern states. A meaningful differentiator between Pine State Regional Center and many other regional centers is that we are an independent regional center. That means we are not linked or owned by the developer of the project, and we can therefore avoid any potential conflict of interest. It's very common in EB5 that the regional center and the developer are one and the same company. While this doesn't automatically mean that there will be a conflict of interest, we believe the regional center is there to protect the EB5 investor, while developers are obviously incentivized to maximize profit. As we don't share any economic ownership with the Big River Steel developers, our entire focus can be on protecting our EB5 investors. Also, unlike regional centers which are created for one specific project only, ACC will continue to operate as we have over 6 decades, and EB5 investors can count on Pine State Regional Center to be by their side for the duration of the green card process and beyond. The second important question for an EB5 investor is whether the EB5 project will provide you with a solid path to a green card. Big River Steel is one of the world's most advanced high-grade steel plants and answers the call of President Trump and the US government to bring back manufacturing industry jobs to the heartland of the United States. Various members of Congress have called Big River Steel the poster project of what EB5 was meant to be.
Big River Steel is investing billions of dollars to build a brand new plant in Texas and to upgrade another one in Arkansas.
The Big River Steel project has received its 924 approval, and we began wide marketing for this project in the spring of 2017. Our investors have been receiving I-526 petition approvals in an average time of about 11 to 15 months, and we've had no denials. Also, importantly, this project is located in a true rural targeted employment area. This means that if members of Congress or the USCIS finally introduce legislative or regulatory reforms for the EB5 program, as is widely expected, the project will continue to benefit from the lower investment price level. Investors in Big River Steel may also benefit from other potential reform proposals, including accelerated processing and set-aside visas for rural projects. To be clear, none of these changes have yet been approved, but as a rural TEA, investors in Big River Steel will be well positioned in case they are. The project has received an unusual amount of government support for an EB5 project, both at the city, state, and federal levels, and the state of Arkansas designated Big River Steel the state's first super project, which opened a number of tremendous financing and tax benefits. Also worth noting is that former Arkansas governor and US President Bill Clinton was very active in recruiting the Big River Steel project to locate in Arkansas. For an EB5 investor, all of this means that there are many stakeholders who are working to make sure Big River Steel is a great success. The third question that you should ask yourself as an EB5 investor is, are you confident that the project will create sufficient jobs so that the conditions on your green card can eventually be removed? As you may know, the EB5 program requires that each applicant's investment be credited with the creation of 10 or more jobs in order to get to keep your green card. Exactly 24 months after receiving your green card, the USCIS tests the project in form of a so-called I-829 filing. If by then the project has created enough jobs to credit the individual investor with at least 10 jobs, then the conditions on your green card are removed. But if at that point it turns out that the project did not create sufficient jobs, the USCIS would withdraw your green card. So this is obviously a significant concern to investors. Uniquely for EB5 investors, Big River Steel has already created all the necessary jobs for the full capital raise, which removes the removal of conditions risk for investors. Big River Steel employed a financing structure which the USCIS conceived of and approved in order to allow projects to begin construction prior to completing their EB5 fundraising. In this structure, the equity owners of the project may provide so-called bridge equity, effectively putting in extra money into the project up front, which will then later be repaid with EB5 capital. So the project can begin construction much sooner and doesn't have to wait for the full EB5 capital raise to be completed. So in our case, in 2014, the owners of Big River Steel provided an additional $200 million, so the project was fully financed on day one. As a result, construction was able to begin in the fall of 2014 and finished already at the end of 2017. So all EB5 capital raised today goes to repay that bridge equity, and most importantly, each new EB5 investor gets credit for the jobs as if they had been invested from the beginning. For a $200 million raise, each of our 400 investors will need to prove at least 10 jobs. So in order for all investors to safely get to keep their green cards, this project needs to have created 4,000 jobs. Well, today, this project has already created over 10,000 verified jobs, which is more than 2.5 times the necessary amount. This has actually been certified by an independent economist group called Evans & Associates, which is one of the most experienced such companies in the EB5 space. So in short, EB5 investors in Big River Steel can rest assured that enough jobs have already been created for the future safe removal of conditions on their green cards. The final question to ask yourself is whether the project is likely to have enough capital to repay you your investment at the end of the process. Another unique advantage of the Big River Steel project is that while most EB5 projects are fundraising during planning or construction phases, investors in our project get to evaluate a project that's already complete and in production. So no financing risk and no completion risk. Big River Steel is today the most advanced high-grade steel plant in America. And this is no regular steel plant. It's actually a steel recycling facility. So it doesn't use iron ore or coal. It turns old cars and industrial waste into new high-grade steel. And the plant doesn't make commodity steel such as rebar or construction steel used in buildings. Rather, it makes the more complicated and valuable steel used for electric transmission lines, engine components, jet turbines, and so forth. You can think of it a little bit like the difference between basic glass and smart glass. So if you think this is basic glass, this is smart glass, many times more valuable than basic glass. Well, Big River Steel makes the equivalent of smart glass. Production of high-grade steels at Big River Steel began already in 2017, and by January 2018, the company was producing a full range of high-margin products. As an investor, you have the benefit of evaluating a project that is already extremely profitable. Demand for Big River Steel's products far exceeds their capacity, and the plant is today operating 3 shifts 24/7. As a result, the company has exceeded its financial projections each month of this year. Another factor that should give investors meaningful comfort is the unusually high-profile caliber of equity investors. Koch Industries, controlled by Charles and David Koch, together the richest investors in America, is the largest equity investor in the project. Other major investors in Big River Steel include Texas Pacific Group, one of the top private equity groups in the world, and the Arkansas Teachers Retirement System, one of the largest state pension fund institutions in Arkansas. Warren Buffett's company, BNSF, has also provided meaningful capital, and its railway infrastructure is one of the key reasons for the Big River Steel's operating efficiency. These groups are all very sophisticated and conservative investment companies, and each of these groups have independently done extensive due diligence on Big River Steel, and all arrived at the conclusion that not only will they be able to get their money back, but they're well positioned to make many multiples on their investments. Since the EB5 investors sit in front of them in the capital stack, this should give investors a lot of confidence. Finally, the amount of equity in the project is much higher than typical for EB5 projects. While at around 10%, the proportion of EB5 capital is smaller than usual. Let's talk a little bit about the EB5 investment and application process. The EB5 investment process has 3 basic stages. First, making the investment and filing your I-526 application with the USCIS. Then, after approval, completing the so-called consular process and receiving your actual green card. And 3, filing the I-829 petition to remove the conditions on your green card. In the first stage, the legal and investment processes run in parallel. The legal process typically takes longer, depending on your individual case and the complexity of your source of funds. This phase typically takes anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 or 8 weeks. Meanwhile, the investment process is a simple and relatively fast process. Most investors can start and finish the investment process within a week. It's very similar to any other fund investment, such as a private equity, venture capital, or real estate investment fund process. It entails submitting an eligibility questionnaire, which our document services team reviews, and then you would receive the so-called subscription package. You can review the subscription documents at your own leisure and then sign the relevant pages. Finally, our team provides you with the wire instructions to make your investment, but all that can be done within about a week. Once you've wired your investment, it will sit in an escrow account until your immigration attorney has filed your petition. We use SunTrust Bank, which is one of the largest escrow banks in the world, and we also use an escrow administrator named NES to oversee the process. NES is the premier escrow administrator in the EB-5 industry. So Pine State, ourselves, never touch your capital. Once your petition has been filed and we've received a receipt from the USCIS, your investment will be released from escrow to Big River Steel. At that point, the clock starts on your 5-year investment. So for example, let's say you invest in the middle of September. Your petition is filed shortly thereafter, and we get the receipt from the USCIS before the month end. Then NES would release your capital to Big River Steel on October 1st, and you would be part of the so-called October tranche. 60 months later, so 5 years later, you would be eligible to receive your investment back, assuming your process is complete at that point. Today, the average processing time for the I-526 petition is around 17 to 20 months. However, those figures include projects with whom the USCIS is not yet familiar or which have some complications. In our case, Big River Steel received its I-924 approval in the summer of 2017, and we've filed almost 100 cases at this point. So the USCIS is very familiar with the project. As a result, we've been seeing an average processing time of about 11 to 14 months. The shortest adjudication time so far has actually been around 10.5 months, so much shorter than the industry average. Investors often ask, so what happens if our I-526 petition is denied? In the unlikely event of a denial, Pine State is committed to returning your capital right away, within less than 40 days. So you don't need to wait for the full 5 years to get your money back. As per our loan agreement with Big River Steel, the company maintains a sufficient capital reserve at all times to meet potential denial events. But to be clear, as long as you engage a top quality immigration law firm to vet and assemble your petition, we believe it's very unlikely that you will be denied. Our regional center has never had a denial, and we only work with immigration law firms who have stellar track records in this regard. Once you've been approved, the second phase takes around 2 to 3 months. It entails making an appointment for a consulate interview, getting your fingerprints taken, other biometrics, and once that paperwork has been submitted and reviewed, you and your family are ready to receive your green cards. Assuming you come from a country that does not currently have a backlog, this means that you're likely to have your green card approximately around 18 to 20 months from the time that you invested. Now you have your green card, and you can begin your life as a U.S. permanent resident. The third phase takes place precisely 24 months after you receive your green card. At this point, your attorney will file the so-called I-829 in order to have the conditions on your green card removed. Effectively, the filing is simply a matter of proving that sufficient jobs have been created. The attorney will file a verification letter from an independent economist who has studied the project and certified the number of jobs created. In our case, the verification letter has already been finalized by the independent economist group Evans & Associates, one of the most experienced such companies in the EB-5 space, certifying that over 10,000 jobs have been created, which is actually 2.5 times the jobs needed for all of the EB-5 investors. As soon as your attorney has made the I-829 filing, your process is deemed to be complete. At that point, you would be eligible to receive your investment back. However, if your total process took less than 5 years, you'd still have to keep your money invested until the end of the 60th month. Hopefully you found the summary overview helpful. We still recommend that you speak with a qualified immigration attorney who can provide more specific details and help to review your personal situation. On behalf of Pine State, I wish you a safe and successful journey.